So, you want to learn to tank. Whether you picked up Marauder or Gladiator at the start of the game, or you're just looking to learn a new role, there are a few things you should learn before you take on Eorzea with your new kit. Keep in mind that this is a guide aimed for casual players, but the basics will still be useful at all levels of content. Let's get into it. The role of a tank is simple. You hold the enemy's attention so your party can attack them with minimal problems. On top of that, tanks have multiple options of reducing incoming damage that affects not only themselves, but their entire party in order to survive otherwise deadly situations. The most important thing you will need to learn as a tank is Aggro Management. Aggro, or enmity if you want to use the proper word, is what decides whether or not you have your target's attention. As long as the baddies are focused on you, that means they won't be attacking your teammates, and that means your team can operate more efficiently. Every tank has an ability that is referred to as their tank stance. These are toggled abilities that, when activated, immensely increases the amount of aggro you generate by attacking. You should always make sure that this is turned on when you are doing group content. When you engage with a group of enemies, a list of names and health bars will appear. All of your engaged enemies will have a shape to the left of their name that tells you how focused that target is on you. If the shape is a red square, that means you have the opponent's attention and they are actively targeting you. If the shape is an orange or yellow triangle, it means that you're not top of the aggro list, but you're close and can probably regain aggro pretty quickly. If it is a green circle, that means you are low on the aggro list and the target is focusing their attention elsewhere. If you need to quickly target a specific monster, you can select their name from the enemy list so you don't need to track them down in a hectic battle screen. Like most other pieces of UI, you can move the enemy list in your HUD layout menu. Personally, I would recommend keeping it somewhere centered so you can quickly reference it at any time. Another way you can track aggro is on your party list. Under every player's class or job icon, there is a meter showing how much aggro each party member has on your current target. The more full the bar, the higher their aggro is. Your role ability Provoke will instantly make you the highest aggro of your current target, but if you're trying to gain aggro on multiple creatures at once, I recommend simply spamming your AoE abilities until you have everything's attention. Now that you have the enemy's attention, where do you bring them? Something I've learned as a tank is it's very important to practice consistency with positions. Once you are happy with the size of your pull, plant yourself so your DPS don't have to chase you and the monsters down. Melee DPS have something called positionals, which means they do more damage if they can easily reach the rears and sides of the enemy. This is especially important on boss fights. If you're fighting a boss, I like to set up a home position. Whenever you have to move to deal with a mechanic, I always try to return to that home position, so my party can always predict where the boss will be and which way they will be facing. Simply put, don't take the boss for a walk and do not spin them unless you want to draw the ire of your melee. If you're dealing with a large group of monsters in a dungeon, I recommend finding a wall you can keep your back to so the party has free access to the enemy's weak points. While you're holding the enemy's attention, you're going to be taking some hits. While your healer should be able to keep you topped off in a small to medium dungeon pull, it's still in your best interest to learn mitigation. As a tank, it is very important to know how to space out your defensive abilities so you can always have something available for sudden damage spikes. Most of your tank role abilities involve reducing damage in some way. Rampart is your bread and butter. It reduces incoming damage by 20%. Short, simple, and to the point. While it's not technically a role ability, every tank has a 30% damage reduction cooldown. It's essentially a stronger second Rampart with a longer cooldown. Reprisal is an AoE that reduces the damage done by all nearby enemies by 10%. So it's an excellent cooldown for dealing with large packs of mobs, but also helps dampen large party-wide attacks that many bosses do. Arm's Length is an ability that most players forget is a defensive ability. While yes, its usual use is to prevent knockback mechanics, it has a secondary effect that applies a slow debuff to non-boss monsters that melee hit you, meaning that monsters will be hitting you 20% less while they have said debuff. Usually, for large dungeon pulls, I like to combo Reprisal and Arm's Length together so that all the monsters are doing much less damage to me overall. Low Blow is a stun that just stops a single target from doing anything for 5 seconds, so it's good to use if an enemy is charging up something nasty. Speaking of which, all tanks also have access to Interject, which will let you interrupt spellcasts if the spell in question has a flashing red cast bar like this. Every tank will also get a superpowered ability called an Invuln, which will allow them to survive almost any attack in the game. Paladins get Hollowed Ground, which simply says no to all incoming damage for 10 seconds, but has the longest cooldown. Warriors get Holmgang, which will make it so they cannot be reduced below 1 HP and has the shortest cooldown of the bunch. Dark Knight has Living Dead, which will save you upon taking lethal damage and will make your abilities heal you, but at the trade-off that if you are not healed enough by the time the buff wears off, it will kill you. If you have a healer in the party, this trade-off isn't very dangerous. And finally, Gunbreakers have Super Bolide. This acts like the Paladin Invuln and it has a shorter cooldown, but will instantly reduce the Gunbreaker's HP to 1, so the healers will have to hustle to top you back up before you start taking damage again. As for other job-specific mitigations, I will just have to recommend you read your tooltips in order to get a better idea of what your class can do for you. Now let's get to some content. If you are new to a dungeon or you're just new to tanking, it doesn't hurt to tell people at the start of the dungeon. The community of Final Fantasy XIV tends to be extremely kind in regards to players who are still learning their job, and it's very rare that I get any responses from these warnings other than complete support. When you're in a dungeon, please don't let yourself feel pressured to pull more than you're comfortable with. While technically you can wall-to-wall pull in most dungeons, I would not recommend doing that unless you have a lot of faith in your ability to keep yourself alive, as well as faith in your healer to do the same. The wall-to-walls will come with experience, I promise, but while starting out, it's important to get a strong feel for how much damage you can take. If you're still nervous about running dungeons with other people, Final Fantasy XIV has the duty support feature that lets you run dungeons with groups of NPCs that more or less simulate running with other players. These dungeons tend to go slower than player-run dungeons, but it's a great way to learn if you want to ease into the role more slowly. When you get to higher levels, you will start unlocking content with larger parties. The same general rules apply, but you will have to share aggro with 1 to 2 other tanks depending on the content. I usually let the boss decide who the main tank is. Turn on your tank stance at the beginning, pull the boss, and once aggro appears to be established, that will be the main tank. Remember that you have the Shirk ability if you want to make sure the other tank is securely at the top of the aggro. There's no need to fight over who gets the boss and cause your healers extra stress. Overall, once you get a hang of the flow of dungeons, tanking for me is the most chill way to play Final Fantasy XIV. It is by far my favorite role in the game, and I would love to see more players enjoy the role as well. While it does have a lot of upfront responsibility, it makes up for it in its consistency. If you have a strong handle of what your kit can do for you, you can walk into most any fight and be ready to rumble at your best. Just remember tank stance, cooldowns, and read your tooltips to figure out the finer details of your specific job. If you want my recommendation of what is the best tank to start with, I would have to say Warrior. It has the most options for self-healing and is an overall very forgiving tank, even though some would call it a little simple rotation-wise. I hope this guide helped you get started on your tanking journey, and let me know in the comments if you have any other tips for fresh tanks. My name is Opal from the Sprout Garden, and as always, thank you for watching. See ya!